I say that homelessness is one of the most visible issues that has the least amount of understanding.
When I was homeless, it was no longer a reason of, hey, I'm going to go party. It's more of, I have to survive now. I have to stay awake. Nobody hurts me. So it becomes a survival mechanism.
So I think we know more about trauma and its impact on the brain. And in my view, a majority of people experiencing homelessness are incredibly traumatized.
When someone is experiencing homelessness, then so much of what I have in my back pocket as a physician goes out the door.
We don't have enough hospital beds for people who truly need it, because right now it is usually jail or languishing on the streets.
It started with depression that then led to now I don't care about anything because now, I haven't slept for 5 days. I just don't care. You start to no longer care about anything. You start to forget what it's like to be human because the longer you're homeless, you go into a survival animalistic instinct.
In recent years, there's been a renewed focus on the importance of mental health. As the homeless crisis has deepened in cities across the country, many have pointed to untreated mental health as a root cause of this crisis. What is the relationship between mental health and homelessness? Today's episode explores this central question as we seek to better understand the connection between human thought and action. Today's guest is Luis Castillon, a peer advocate and street outreach worker at LA Family Housing. You'll also hear from Amy Turk, CEO of Downtown Women's Center in Skid Row, Colleen Murphy, former Associate Director of Unsheltered Strategies at the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, and currently the Principal for Homelessness Solutions at LaSar Development Consultants, Constanza Pachon, CEO of The Whole Child, a mental health agency for families in Los Angeles, and Margot Kuchel, Professor of Medicine and Director of the University of California, San Francisco Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative. Join us as we talk about homelessness, because there's no issue that's closer to home.
I'm Amy Turk.
I'm Colleen Murphy.
My name is Margot Kuchel.
My name is Constanza Pachon.
Mi nombre es Luis Castillon. Welcome to Homeland.
Cool. Alrighty. One of the things that I've noticed in the conversations we've been having so far is there's some things that we'll talk about where we'll just kind of park there for a little bit, right? And we'll just kind of be like, hey, this is a really interesting topic. Let's go a little bit deeper. But yeah, we'll just go through it. Be great.
Okay, my name is Luis Castillon. I prefer Luis. I'm a peer advocate for LA Family Housing. We are not necessarily a nonprofit, but we are. I mean, not only from outreach to helping individuals, families, we also help with permanent and supportive housing. We have several properties that LA Family Housing owns. So we like to joke around that we're saving the world one referral at a time. And it's great because I am the first process of that. Where
you're like the front door
exactly
to the rest of the system.
Yes, I will enroll you in our program. I will put in a referral for interim housing, and then you're on your way to getting permanent supportive housing. I love my work. I really do, because I'm helping somebody. Hello, good morning, outreach. Hello, anybody home? If it's the first time I find you or I encounter you. Hey, good morning. How you doing? I like to use comedy as an assessment tool.
Does that work? Yeah.
It does, because it tells me a lot about you. If you're not laughing at my dumb jokes, then that tells me something else. It tells me, oh, maybe this person right now isn't having a good day. I start with that, just introducing myself, bag of food, a bottle of water, a hygiene kit. And then I will try to follow up with them within the next few days or the next week. Another example that I love is I had a couple. I had been working with them for 5-6 months. Sometimes people are very chatty, very cordial, and it's great because you get to see, they have personalities, crack jokes,
Yeah.
And
they're human beings.
Absolutely. But it would always break my heart when it would start raining, because they would move from their location from the park to underneath the freeway. And that's heartbreaking where I'm like, I have to tell him, yeah, you know what? Your referral hasn't changed. I do want to touch on something because there was an issue where he had a mental health episode and the security had to get called, police had to get called. He ended up going to the hospital, but there was a barrier that they would not allow. They would allow her to go back, but they wouldn't allow him to go back. Fortunately for them, we all came together. You know, the countywide matcher advocated strongly that they should be given a second chance, that that individual did not attack staff, didn't attack her. It was just difficult because of his mental health issue that he was having a psychotic episode. I kept advocating that the longer he would stay on the street, the harder it would be for him to get connected to say mental health services. And this, I remember it very clearly. It's like the week up until Christmas, he asked me, "Hey, Louis, I want to talk to a psychiatrist. I need help with this. Can you help me? Can you help me?" And I immediately put in the referral for DMH. Within 2 weeks, DMH goes out to assess him. But the problem sometimes is they wouldn't be able to find him for whatever reasons. There's no one to blame here. It's just what happens sometimes where you can't find somebody. They move location, their phone dies, you know, they can't charge their phone, whatever reason. And this became clear that he was looking for the help. I did my job. DMH were trying to do their job. But
and that's Department of Mental Health.
Yes, the Department of Mental Health. But the issue is he's still in an unstable place because why? He's not housed. And so that was my arguing point, that if we can get this person indoors, he can now begin the process of getting the help that he really needs and get the help that he's not only needs, but he's asking for.
I want to talk to you about the intersection of behavioral health and homelessness. There's a lot of narratives around what causes homelessness. Often in the public discourse, behavioral health is one of those things that comes up. In your work, what have you seen to be the relationship between behavioral health and homelessness?
There's clearly a nexus there, but I think it's important for people to understand the context.
This is Margot Kuchel, professor of medicine and director of the University of California, San Francisco Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative. In addition to being a practicing physician, Margot oversaw the largest study on Californians experiencing homelessness in decades.
One is that the person with behavioral health disabilities you're much more likely to remember than your Uber driver who's actually living in their car but doing everything to hide their homelessness, and you have no idea that they're experiencing homelessness. You know, I'm a practicing physician, and I take care of a lot of people who work full-time and are living in their cars, and nobody ever knows that they might have a membership to a gym, and they go and shower there, and they are really keeping it on the down low that they're actually experiencing homelessness. So in the public imagination, that person isn't homeless, even though they most certainly are homeless, and their health effects show.
I say that homelessness is one of the most visible issues that has the least amount of understanding.
Here's Colleen Murphy, former Associate Director of Unsheltered Strategies at the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, and currently the Principal for Homelessness Solutions at LaSar Development Consultants.
You know, new statistics say 20% of people have a mental health diagnosis. It's just
people in general.
Just people in
20%.
general. Absolutely.
Wow.
Including myself. And if you don't deal with it yourself, somebody I'm sure very close to you does also. There's this idea that somehow, oh, okay, that's why you're homeless. And therefore you're not really a victim, or you don't really have the same rights as somebody who just fell into homelessness because they lost their apartment. So there's this idea that it kind of separates others people. But the thing is, it's just there regardless.
Yeah. It's a health condition.
Issue, you know?
In our sector, the conversation of the intersectionality of mental health and homelessness is all focused on the cause, that mental health issues cause homelessness. We focus a little bit more on the effect of the homelessness experience in the family and the children.
This is Constanza Pachon, CEO of The Whole Child, a mental health agency for families in Los Angeles.
And we want to lessen that trauma, that effect, especially in children. That is done to curb generational homelessness and to lessen the length of the homelessness experience and hopefully the potential recidivism for them to go back to the streets.
Yeah. It's revolutionary in a sense because we are focusing, I think, as a society, our attention on almost this kind of one-way street where we are saying, and this is part of the kind of the narrative, that homelessness is caused by deteriorating mental health, right? The narrative is, people are on the street because of a mental health crisis. But what you're saying is that you're focusing on the effects that homelessness had on that family and what it sounds like on their mental health.
Most definitely.
A lot of folks witness people who are living outdoors, people on the streets, and they may be appearing to have a mental health episode. And those memories stick with people. And it's almost become synonymous when folks talk about homelessness, specifically in LA. Mental health and substance use are the two things that just kind of tack right onto it. And they say people are homeless because of mental health or substance use. What has been your experience?
Yes, they do go hand in hand because it's a coping mechanism. It's a coping mechanism to say, hey, I got to find a way to deal with this terrible, traumatic event that's going on in my life. So I'm just going to find a way to deal with that. And the most simplest way is if you see somebody that you know on the street and say, hey, can I get some of that? They're going to say, yeah, sure, come, But then that opens the doors to other barriers. So on top of the trauma, it's not just one thing, it's everything combined. I mean, personally, firsthand, I can say yes. Because when I was homeless, it was no longer a reason of, hey, I'm going to go party. It's more of, I have to survive now. I have to stay awake. I have to make sure I'm safe, that no one takes my stuff, nobody hurts me. So it becomes a survival mechanism.
Substance use was connected to survival.
Exactly.
You can name who's going to have a lot of homelessness or a little homelessness by looking at the housing costs and the income mix match in that region. But that within a region, if you have a mental health or substance use disorder, you're much more likely to become homeless. And that makes a lot of sense. As, again, a physician who does a lot of work with people with these disabilities actually are definitionally means that it interferes with your social functioning. Like, we don't diagnose someone as having a substance use disorder based on how much substances they use. We diagnose them if those substances interfere with their social functioning, meaning their ability to get to work, their legal functioning, if they're picked up by the police or whatever. And so, of course, if you're in a really brutal housing market, which we are in most of the country, and you have a disability that interferes with your ability to work or manage social relationships, of course it's true that you're going to be at higher risk of losing out in that brutal housing market. The second thing is what we like to say in our sort of geeky medicine way is effect cause, meaning that the homelessness, having these disabilities puts you at higher risk of becoming homeless, but the homelessness itself dramatically worsens these disabilities. It makes them worse, and it makes it much, much harder to get treatment. As a physician, I'm not scared of behavioral health problems. We actually have relatively good treatments for them. They're not moral failures. They are just part of the human experience, right? That the experiences that people go through, responses to trauma, and we have lots we can do to help people. When someone is experiencing homelessness, then so much of what I have in my back pocket as a physician goes out the door. The other thing is, we found shockingly high rates of violence that people experienced when they're homeless. And not only were the rates of violence, both physical and sexual assault, really through the roof, but that violence shifted to people unknown to them. So that having experienced violence places people at higher risk of homelessness because of it leading to trauma and all of the other ways it interferes. But we ask people who perpetrated the violence, and in general, before people become homeless, the violence is perpetrated by people known to them. And after they become homeless, over half of it is perpetrated by total strangers because you really lose the protection of a door to lock.
And I think about it for myself. I have familial high cholesterol, and so if I have a heart attack tomorrow, is somebody going to go, well, it's because she had high cholesterol, and put the blame on that. Or would they just care that I have a heart attack, right? And try to help me. It's the same thing. Try living on the street for a night. Try not sleeping well. Try being in the cold. That's not going to do well. So even if you're doing okay, a few nights of that, you're really going to struggle. It's this idea of what came first, the chicken or the egg. I always tell people it doesn't matter. The matter is I need to help get that person off the street so they can heal and get the resources they need, because you can't do it on the streets. It's really hard. Yeah. And the longer you're out there, the worse off you're going to be. I had a housed neighbor a few weeks ago have a mental health crisis. It was a very traumatic incident for everybody involved, but he's with his family now. He has resources now where he's getting help. So part of it too is if you have that privilege, it's not going to be easy, but you have the resources. But many people don't.
I want to turn back the clock a little bit if we can. And I want to ask you about what home looked like for you growing up. What was some of the strongest memories that you personally have of home?
I'm originally from El Salvador. So is my mom. She came to this country and then she brought me along. And family was always there. Like I had that stability in my life with family, both on my mom's side and my dad's side. My dad's side lives in Virginia. My mom's side lives here in LA. I have clear memories of Virginia, waiting for the bus in the snow, and we would go camping in Virginia Beach. So family and stability was always there. My mom met my stepdad when I was about 6 or 7, and they've been together ever since. I have 3 younger brothers. I'm not going to go into other issues that arose, but yeah, when I was younger, there was issues with my stepdad. He was very verbally abusive, sometimes a little physically abusive. But at the end, I think it's understanding that that's how he was raised as well. Life experiences can be passed down, both good and bad. We came to LA maybe when I was maybe 4. But yeah, ever since then, we've just been here. I went to high school both in Santa Monica and LA. I graduated from LA High. I grew up out here in LA.
There was a moment where housing became unstable for you.
Yes, it was when I broke up with the mother of my daughter. Because I'm stressed out with the whole breakup. I decided, hey, you know what? Let me take the car and just go out to Vegas and come back from Vegas. And then I'm just living in my car. I'm just literally living in my car. And then eventually the car gets taken away. It starts to affect my job performance. At the time I was working as a game tester. I remember my lead come up to me. He's like, hey man, why don't you take a week off? I could tell you're going through a difficult situation. Please just take a week off. And that week off led for me being laid off because I just couldn't function. I'm dealing with it in the way that I knew best. And then it just led to more and more things because the more depressed I got, the more I got involved with drugs.
Mental health isn't one thing. You do have people who have severe and persistent mental health issues that need a lot more resources to help them. But others, it could be manageable with the right resources. But I look at it as filling up a cup. And if you have this cup, if the water represents trauma and pain and tough things, you have this much, it's okay. But you keep adding to it, you keep adding to it, you keep adding to it, it will overflow. And that's the thing. Some people, their trauma goes up to here, their issues go up to here. But so many people who live in our community, because they can't get assistance, they have to worry about how they're going to feed their kids. They have to worry about eviction. They have to worry about how they're going to get a job when their job has gone away. All those things add up and overflows. We have to treat the whole person. The other piece too, that's challenging for us in this work is that sometimes it's a mental health issue, but sometimes it's a substance use disorder issue too. And it's sometimes hard to understand what's what.
Yeah.
And if you're, dealing with some challenging things, sometimes you self-medicate with substances to make it more manageable and to stop the voices or to help you sleep or to help you stay up or to just deal with the trauma of it all. And so you have to look at the whole person. And if it's substance use that we need to focus on first, we start there. If it's, mental health, we start there. Sometimes we can do both. But it's one of those things where you have to literally look at each person and see what they need. And that takes conversations, that takes trust, that takes consistency, that takes a willingness to see the person and not just as a number or a title called homeless.
When I first started, I remember my interview. It was so awful.
This is
I can't
people
believe,
concerned or
yeah,
with women's?
I can't believe they hired me.
Here's Amy Turk, CEO of Downtown Women's Center in Skid Row.
And I
Why
asked,
was it awful? What made it awful?
I just answered everything wrong.
I mean, I'm sure we all did when we first started.
But one thing I remember when they asked, why do you think people experience homelessness? I included mental illness in that list. And I don't believe that anymore. Mental illness exists long before homelessness has been so visible. Yeah, I don't necessarily put the two together. Though, once experiencing homelessness,
Yeah, what's the relationship
then I think,
that has on mental
yeah,
health?
it's awful. How in the world, you can't be in survival mode for more than 24 hours and not have a deep impact on literally your brain.
Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because there are people who are living in survival mode, not just for 24 hours,
Yeah.
but for years.
Right.
So, yeah, walk us through that a little bit.
So that becomes complex trauma that literally changes the neurology of your brain. And people move into fight or flight or freezing responses. And it's really hard to think linearly. It's hard to keep your appointments. It's hard not to go from 0 to 60 sometimes if you're maybe a little angry. Or sometimes that's kind of the fight mode. Or you might freeze and just not be able to really do anything. So I think we know more about trauma and its impact on the brain. And in my view, a majority of people experiencing homelessness are incredibly traumatized. And we're still expecting them to remember that service is open at 9 a.m., breakfast is at 9:30. And if you don't come, oh well, and navigate complex systems like applying for Medi-Cal is complex. And it's not to say people can't do it, but it really needs to be with staff that are incredibly flexible and understand that people are coming in traumatized.
What does a program look like that takes into account that trauma?
Yeah, trauma-informed care is the buzzword. And
Can you explain that for us, what that means?
it means that you're coming to this work with a perspective of not thinking what's wrong with you, but that something has happened to you. So not necessarily that you're going around to who you're serving asking what happened to you, but you know that something has happened to this person that is deeply traumatizing. And when you have that lens, there's key principles of trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
And number one is safety. So physical safety, psychological safety. And without that, it's just really hard to make decisions that might make sense to others and help people move forward.
That's how I learned how to cope with it.
Yeah.
Then it's like, hey, let me use this drug to make me feel better and not feel anything and stay awake. And that was the cycle of my life for many, many years is, something bad would happen. I would use, and then I would end up in a psych hold. Boom, I have mental health issues too. Combine that, and lo and behold, that led it up to me on a 5150 hold, my first experience. Wow. It's a 3-day hold where you're either a danger to yourself or a danger to others. And it can be very vague, but essentially you're diagnosed by doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists. I like to ask this rhetorical question. If someone who hasn't slept for 5 days and is going through a very difficult time, they will show signs that they might be schizophrenic, they might be psychotic, but what if it's just temporary?
Yeah. Yeah. You move from where you were living, you're in your car, and then you're also experiencing kind of this cycle with substance use. And now there's mental health diagnoses involved. And you said that went on for, that cycle went on for how long?
Oh, that went on, that started when I was 27. I'm now, 43. And
I don't mean to date you, but I just want to ask
I'm just thinking, I'm trying to do the math in my head. And it's over 13 years. 13 years of dealing with both substance abuse and mental health issues. You know, I used to think if I can just remove the meth out of the equation, then my life would be better. You know, I would drink, I would smoke weed. But for some reason, when really things would get out of hand and things, I couldn't find a way to deal with things, I would always go back to the meth. And then that just led to another nightmare because eventually it's not just a 5150 hold, but later on in my life, I would go to jail, you know, and that brings on even more trauma.
Wow. So often we think about something like housing insecurity or homelessness as something that is foreign, that it really couldn't happen to us. But it's all of those things kind of stacking on each other at the same time. And it's all these different factors that are coming together. There's a friend and colleague who described it this way, where he said those moments are almost like a car crash in slow motion, where there's initial trauma, but then it's like it takes time for that to fully play out. And also for folks to heal from that.
It's hard for the general public to understand.
Here's Constanza Pachon again, CEO of The Whole Child.
And I'll tell you, be very honest, even when I started at The Whole Child, didn't fully grasp the magnitude of crisis and trauma that homelessness creates in a family or in an individual, but especially in a family, I would say.
Do you feel like crisis sometimes begets more crisis?
Oh yeah, it needs to all needs to kind of all come out, and everything needs to be worked out and get worse, I think, before it gets better for these families. Because this crisis, when they find their life kind of uprooted, right? They've never been homeless before, many of these families that we work with. They found themselves there. And I think that the general public sometimes cannot place themselves in the shoes of a family that is in complete crisis. Some people say, and I have had these conversations, let's not even judge why people fell into homelessness. But why is it so hard to get yourself out of homelessness? Go get a job, and then you can pay rent. And then that's it. What's the problem? You can do it. Go get 3 jobs. So many people work 3 jobs. And well, these are some people that are in no shape, way, or form ready to even hold a job. Yeah, you can go and put them, and they don't hold it. They're dealing with the trauma that this is generating, the effect that it has on them. And it is not as easy. People don't understand that when someone is in utter crisis, it's hard to come out of it. It's hard to come out of that vortex.
Yeah.
And be ready to take the steps that might sound easy. Yeah, you can go get 3 jobs, right? But if you cannot hold them, if your mental health is all over the place, then you're not going to be able to sustain that unit, to pay the rent, to stay there for the long shot.
Yeah.
Here's Margot Kuchel again, professor of medicine and director of the University of California, San Francisco Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative.
There's really good evidence from both the US and Canada that providing housing, subsidized housing, with voluntary but robust supportive services can keep even the people with the most significant behavioral health disorders, the most significant, who are really just a small portion of the population, can succeed in housing 90% of those folks and improving their behavioral health outcomes. We have struggled in California both because we haven't had the housing for people, but also, if we're being honest with ourselves, we haven't really provided the right mix of services. We are treating cancer with an aspirin. We need the full service package. If someone has a psychosis and a substance use problem, you need a more robust model of services. You don't force it on them, but you provide the safety and security of home. And then you provide the services. And what has just been found again and again and again is if you do those 2 things together, people both stay housed and take up the services, which is great because that helps people heal.
Yeah.
In some ways, we're in the business of creating more housing opportunities and more employment opportunities. But once you're in housing and moving forward, still, what does safety look like? So I think that's something that we took to heart a little bit more in this needs assessment, is that it's not like housing equals safety necessarily, but then there's a lot of healing that housing can help facilitate, and a lot of supports that are still needed once you're permanently housed. There's someone I've known for about 20 years now, I think. She lived outside for 5 years and near a library, and felt safe there because there was a group of veterans that kind of helped her stay safe too. Living with symptoms of psychosis, and for 5 years thought that every outreach team who came to approach her was out to get her. And one day she got so sick and she finally said, yeah, I'll go see a doctor. And that led her to living in the shelter that I worked at, and got to know her there. And she got connected to the Department of Mental Health and on the right meds. She then moved into permanent supportive housing and did really well there, became more involved in advocacy, and we traveled to DC. You and I've been to the National Alliance to End Homelessness.
Yeah.
She spoke there one year. She then started to work for us as a case manager, and then she went on to another organization and is the director now. We continue to do a lot of advocacy work together, and I feel like she's my colleague.
Yeah.
But she lives with severe mental illness that has been now treated for 10 plus years.
I mean, mostly it was my mom that was always very supportive. One time when I got released from the hospital, she had set me up with this nice room.
Okay.
So I was able to make my rent, and I was able to, maintain it. And that went on for 3-4 years.
Which is a long time.
It is
3-4
a long
years.
time,
Yeah.
because at the meantime, I'm going back to school so I can get a bachelor's in human communications.
Was there a season of housing insecurity after that stability?
Yes, because once again, something would happen and I would go back to the only way I knew how to live and cope with life. I can't tell you there's this one moment where okay, yeah, now you're about to go be homeless. You ready? It's not an overnight process. It's a gradual process. In my experience, that it started with depression that then led to now I don't care about anything, because now, I haven't slept for 5 days. I just don't care. You start to no longer care about anything. You start to forget what it's like to be human.
Does everything else just kind of fade out?
Yeah, it fades out, because the deeper and deeper you're going into this dark place, everything just seems to just not matter anymore.
Yeah.
Family, my daughter, work, even hygiene, you just don't care. And that's just the stark reality of being homeless, that you are exposed to not the best qualities of humanity.
Yeah.
Because I'm a firm believer that the longer you're homeless, you go into a survival animalistic instinct. Combine that with drugs and not sleeping for 5 days to even 2 weeks. Most of the time, I'm on edge. It's just scary. It is really scary.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how, in your experience, you've seen someone's mental health be impacted the longer they were on the street?
There was a gentleman who
Here's Colleen Murphy again.
you probably saw, most homeless service people saw, that was really close to our offices downtown. And he had been there as long as anyone could remember. Everybody tried to help. And the longer he was out there, the more embedded he got, the sicker he got. And just every day we could see his decompensation every day. And the longer you're out there, and that's why we have to get people off the streets as quick as possible, because the longer you're out there, the sicker you get and the harder it is to accept help. If you're in a bad situation, you sometimes trick yourself to think, this is okay, or this is all I'm worth, right? If you start seeing yourself being viewed as homeless and that you're othered and you're not worthy, you're going to start believing it too. So when somebody's coming to help you, I don't need help, because you start believing you're not worth it. And so part of the work we do is to help people realize They are so worth it. Some of the kindest, warmest, amazing people I have ever met has been people that I am there, quote unquote, to help. But a lot of times they're helping me just as much because it shows me the true humanity in people. And to be able to be on the streets and still show that kindness and warmth and care, it's beautiful.
The trials that people go through to find a bathroom and how undignified it feels just to live every single day figuring out how to survive. And that people wanted very much to connect to housing, to services, to employment, but at times felt too embarrassed by their appearance or their lack of access to a shower. Sometimes that was even a barrier to reconnect with family and friends.
What was the thing that led you out of this cycle of homelessness?
For me, I wouldn't sleep. The only times I would sleep would be during the daytime on the bus or on the metro, because I knew it was daytime. And usually when you see somebody sleeping on the bus, during the day, like kind of leave them alone. But I do remember where it really changed for me. And it was really family. My uncle owns a restaurant. And I remember I would purposely stay away from that area because of the shame of maybe if he would see me. But I remember being on the bus at night. I remember the bus driver saying, "Hey man, you got to get off the bus now. It's the last stop." I'm like, "Oh." And I look around, I'm like, "Oh crap, I'm by USC." And I remember it took me almost 3 days to go to my uncle's restaurant. I hadn't showered, I don't know, maybe over a week. I know I'm dirty, I probably smell, just shame. I mean, honestly, it's just like, why am I bringing this BS to my uncle's business? Why bring my problems to his front door? He probably has enough to worry about. And it's just that shame, that guilt of like, maybe I don't deserve help. Or maybe he won't even help me. Or maybe it was a fear of rejection of saying, "Hey, you know what, man, you dug your own grave." Like when you're already going through a difficult situation, it can be very hard to think positive and say, "Oh, you know what, maybe this person might help me." Or maybe it's worth a shot. I remember thinking like, "No, don't go, Lewis. Don't go." Like, no, he's gonna tell your mom, he's gonna tell your aunt. They're gonna be like, "Oh, look at him, he's at it again with his BS." It's that fear of I don't know what to do, and I'm probably like 80 pounds lighter, sucked up. Mind you, I've been smoking meth. I haven't been eating. I've been up for at times for almost a week to 2 weeks. I look like a blow pop, just a big round head and just really, really thin. And disheveled, I probably did smell. Hadn't shaved. I probably had a beard that didn't look maintained. But it took me like 3 days to get the courage to say, "Man, I know I need help." But because I know he owns a restaurant, I'm like, you know what? Maybe he gives me some food. Remember, I go in and he's like, hey, are you hungry? Would you like something to eat? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, order whatever you want. Do you need anything? I'm like, actually, could I get some cigarettes? He's like, here's $20, go next door, but can you do me a favor? Can I take a picture of you? It's like, I want to send it to your mom. He comes back with the food and he's like, how would you like to go to El Salvador? And it took me like maybe 10, 15 seconds to process that.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I knew if I stayed in LA, I'm going to continue to use, I'm going to continue to just go on this dark path where at this point, I've already been evicted. I've already lost my car because I crashed. I'm currently homeless. And the only thing I have is literally a hoodie, a jacket, and 2 pairs of pants that I'm wearing at the same time. I remember thinking, yeah, I do want to go to El Salvador because I know if I stayed in LA, there's nothing good that's going to happen. I've already, nobody wants nothing to do with me. And long story short, within a week, I'm on a plane to El Salvador.
I saw a lot of people today who they walk past someone who appears to be having a mental health crisis or episode, and kind of their logical response is, well, this person appears to be homeless. Mm-hmm. They appear to be having this crisis. Therefore, 2 and 2, mental health equals homelessness. As you've done this work, what are some of those perceptions that you've encountered around how we think about mental health and its relationship to homelessness?
Well, when I see that experienced by someone living outside, what I want for them is more treatment.
Here's Amy Turk again.
And in some cases, I think it is appropriate to hospitalize someone and provide, medications and help them think more clearly and then make choices more on their own. So what I want is a little more inpatient treatment beds.
Do we have enough right now?
Not at all. I mean, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I could technically, hospitalize someone, but there's literally no place. It's so rare to find a place, and those places aren't really good staff, but not necessarily a trauma-informed environment. They tend to be in the corner of an emergency room.
Can I ask a hyper-practical question? Why aren't there enough spaces?
Because you need full psychiatry, medical doctors, social workers, or, maybe it's a lack of political will or maybe thinking, a little of the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, which is also not just about mental illness, lots of things related to homelessness. So that might sound surprising, actually, that I want more involuntary hospitalizations. But I do think for some who are really acutely struggling with mental illness and psychosis, it's needed. And I've seen it really benefit people. And I've seen people thrive after finding the right type of treatment.
Yeah.
Thank you for my family that was there in the most hardest part of my life, because I believed I was alone. I really did believe I was alone because of the shame, the fear of what I was going through that I had done to myself. That it started with, I don't want to live, to now it's just like, what are you doing to your life and what are you doing to others? Especially like my mom, oh man, like I put my mom through a nightmare. And not just in this last run, but just a cycle of my issues with addiction and mental health and just trying to figure out what to do with life.
Wow.
I remember thinking while I was down there, it's like, man, I got to figure out how I'm going to fix my life again. And it's just this self-hate, this self-shame of like, man, again? Really? Again, Lewis? Like, you're here again? Like, how did you do it? Why? But you know what? Had it not been for all that to happen, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now, Ben. And I'm very fortunate for that dark time in my life, because it's now in the work that I do that it really is, it's priceless.
So your experience with homelessness coming to an end, it was your uncle saying, are you hungry? What do you need? Do you want to go home? Be with your mom?
Yeah.
Like, pretty simple questions, it seems. But he asked you those things, and in that moment you were ready, and that's what you needed.
Absolutely.
Wow. What are some of the things that are working about how we are supporting people when it comes to mental health?
Well, it's less and less stigmatized, I think. I hope people feel that.
Yeah.
In homeless services, adding a peer specialist has been really helpful, someone who's had some level of lived experience. We find they connect better and also bridge whatever fear people have about a medical doctor or psychiatrist. That mental health does not have to be traditional sit-down therapy, that it can be groups, art, connection with community. I see that working more and more.
Looking back on kind of this period in your life, what's your overall perspective of that season?
Looking back, I mean, for me, and at that point in my life, I was just depressed. I didn't want to live. I just wanted to numb myself. And I remember that's why I started going back to the hard drugs. Now I understand it was just where I was at, that I didn't realize that there were other ways to deal with life and other coping mechanisms or healthy habits. So looking back now, it's just like, well, that's the journey I needed to go through to get me where I'm at today. Because if it wasn't for that bad experience, if it wasn't for the dark time in my life, I wouldn't be able to appreciate what I have now,
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying my life is perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. It makes me work even harder, even with my participants. I realize that I can't live their life and I can't make choices for them, but I can just do my job and connect them with that help that they may need. And if they're going to take advantage of it, well, good. And if they don't, I have to respect their choices, Because it is a choice for everyone. Everybody has to make a choice in life, For some of us, it's easier. For some of us, it's even way difficult.
With people with severe and persistent mental health needs, it's not easy, right? And so part of our challenge is so many people have ended up becoming homeless that the homeless services system, the volume is so great that we can't focus on those to the level we need to because the need is so great. When there is a mental health crisis, whether it's on the streets or in houses, we send police. Oftentimes, if you try to get a mental health team out, it could take hours, if not days. So police end up being clinicians. We don't have enough hospital beds for people who truly need it and frankly want it. So it's also a system we need to invest in the resources for people with severe and persistent mental health needs. Because right now, it is usually jail or languishing on the streets. And so give us those resources and truly invest. And then I think we won't see things like that happen as much. But right now, those are our options often.
Most of the families, when they come to us, they're not experiencing some of the higher level diagnoses like schizophrenia, psychosis, those paralyzing diagnoses. But either before they entered the homelessness episode or through it, then they're going to be experiencing depression, paralyzing anxiety. And I think those are some of the two that we see, especially in the caregivers and in the children, but they also then experience many other behavioral issues that come with the shame and how to manage the secret, if you will, of being homeless at school. So a lot of them develop really aggressive behaviors in school, aggressive behaviors towards their caregivers and even shelter staff because they're just lashing out because they don't understand what's going on.
Good morning, outreach. Hello.
I want to ask you about how you started working at LA Family Housing.
Somebody that I know that works at LA Family Housing at the time asked me, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I work at a pet store. She asked me like, hey, how would you be interested in helping the homeless? And when she asked me that question, I was just like, well, what do you mean? Like, because there's several ways to help.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, giving them food, getting them indoors. And immediately I was like, oh man, that'd be great. That would be awesome because that would be work that mattered. Little did I know that she was pretty much interviewing me on the spot. And she's like, here's my information. Here's the link. And within a month, like I'm hired, and the rest is history. I mean, I'm coming up on almost a year in July. At the end of the day, it's an opportunity that I'm really appreciative every day because I know my work matters. It's that person that I meet in front of me that I'm just there to help you in any way that I can, really, if it's just listening. And I try to tell that to some of the new people that we've recently hired. Just listen to what they're telling you, and listening and hearing are two different things.
What does your daughter think about the work that you do now?
She's happy that the work that I do. Her mom always jokes around. It's like, hey, I told you should have done this years ago, because I am good with people. I mean, I'm like maybe 3 semesters away from a human communications degree.
Well, congrats. You're almost there.
Almost there. But my daughter is very proud of the work that I do. I try to instill that in my daughter. Like, hey, look, if you can keep an open mind and just be observant and just listen, then maybe you might learn something that might help you on down the line. So she's very proud of the work that I do.
Practically, like for people who might not work for a homeless service provider, how do they support families who have been through that season?
If you happen to find yourself across the table interviewing somebody that cannot explain a gap in their employment, cannot explain what happened there, and they decide to be brave enough and disclose, we were down on our luck, and this is what happened. Give them a chance. That's very practical. Give them a chance. They have the resilience. They made it out. They probably are going to work out for you. If you are, a parent, just teach your children to be kind to other children that, might come to school with poor hygiene, right? Because they might not have had a place where to take a shower that morning, right? that are maybe a little bit hungrier because they might not have had dinner the night before, right? If you're a parent, take the time to explain to your children why are people sleeping on the streets and that there has to be some compassion to it. How you speak about it, it's important. It's more of changing the mindset. Be more curious as to, okay, do you feel that as a society we're spending all these funds to try to solve homelessness and it seems that there's more of it? Hey, reach out to some of the providers and ask if you want to understand more. If you feel, get more informed from first-hand information rather than second-hand, right? So then you could try to change your mindset towards it.
What is something you want folks to hold on to who hear this conversation when they think about homelessness?
I'm going to first talk about what not to do. So it was early 2021. Those of us doing this work were working night and day, trying to keep people safe on the streets. It was epic what was happening, moving people into hotel rooms, providing resources, food support. It was incredible. So Friday night, I finally got a break, went out to get some food, and fell in a hole and landed on the ground and shattered my foot. And I was on the ground in between two cars. I didn't have my phone with me because it was in the car. It was dark. And I recalled that somebody in the business next door was eating outside. So I started to ask for help. I said, excuse me, I think I broke my ankle. I need somebody to call 911. Nobody heard, kept saying it, stuck in between two cars by myself in utter agony. Ask again. Next time I ask a little louder. Nothing. I thought I might be there all night. Thankfully, somebody did pull up. A different individual literally got eyes on me, called 911. When the fire trucks came and everything, that family who I originally had called for help came over and said, we just thought you were a crazy homeless person. There was no shame in saying that somehow if I was this, that I didn't deserve help, and that there was no humanity in what they said because they thought I was garbage. They thought I didn't deserve help. And that stuck with me, that if we don't see the humanity in this and when somebody's calling for help, regardless of their housing status, that we get them help and that we don't think that somebody deserves to suffer because of their housing status. So we need to really check how we view this from a real basic level. Like when you see somebody experiencing homelessness, truly, what do you think? Because I think a lot of people do think some pretty concerning things. And so how do we break through that stigma and be the one who's going to call when somebody needs help, to be the person to help? And we all have to do it and see people with that humanity. And when we do that, all the other things will start to fall in line. But if we don't, we're never going to get there.
If there's one takeaway that someone who's listening to this conversation would walk away from, what would you want that to be?
You know what? Compassion, just compassion for somebody that you can tell that they're homeless or that they're going through a difficult time. I remember I was in Hollywood and I was just on a bench and I'm in my head and somebody walks up and says, "Hey, are you hungry?" Next thing I know, I have a box of Popeye's chicken in front of me. And I'm like, who are you? Like, wow. And that was amazing for me, you know? So to me, it's just
an act of compassion.
Just an act of compassion. And if you can't do that, then just remind yourself that, hey, you have a home to go to and that person doesn't, you know? And that's the difference. But at the end of the day, that person in front of you has feelings, has emotions, that they're just going through a difficult time. You know, there's a great quote. I don't know who's the origin of this quote, but be kind because we're all fighting a hard battle. And I believe that. My mom likes to say something in Spanish, que cada persona es un mundo. Everybody is a world unto themselves. Just help in the best way that you can. Sometimes just food and water can be the way you can help them. For me, it's just like, no, that was just my journey. And they helped them in the best way that they could. But at the end of the day, I still had to make a choice and say, yeah, I do want to go to El Salvador. Yeah, I do want to stay in this hotel room. That also played a role, you know? Is there hope on the horizon? Yeah, because homelessness, I think it's being better understood than it was a couple of years ago. But today, honestly, it's just listening to what the person is telling me in front of me. They're going through a difficult time. And if we can just help them in a simple way that can lead to something bigger, why not?
And I looked everywhere until I found you look like home, and I hope you stick around.
There is a connection between mental health and homelessness. And there is always more to every story. While there are system changes every community needs to courageously undertake to better support people to find help and healing, it's critical we allow the best of our humanity to lead the way. Let us be moved by compassion, compelled by curiosity, and never cease extending understanding to our neighbors. On our next episode, The Pursuit of Peace, we explore the dynamic relationship between homelessness and substance use. All that and more, next time on Homeland. We want to invite you to join the Homeland by subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more information on how to gain a deeper understanding of homelessness, visit ourhomeland.us for additional content, photos, the full interviews from today's episode, and more resources on how you can join the work of bringing people home. Homeland was created by myself, Ben Kay, and Fulcrum Productions, in association with Astoria. The complete series is brought to you by United Way of Greater LA and distributed by PRX. This episode was written and produced by Ben Kay and Andrew Didway. Photography, marketing, and additional production by Jared Beasley. This episode was edited by Andrew Didway with additional editing by Sam Morgan. Our original music is by Jeffrey Emerson Geyser. Episode artwork by Philippe Martinez. Social media consulting is by Veronica Roy. Our Rockstar Podcast consulting crew is Marisol Bayo, Jerry Jones, Hazel Lopez, and Barbara Olson. Members of the Homeland Advisory Committee for this episode are Amara Ananiwu, Shannon Murray, Brad West, Tawny St. James, and Jeremy Goldstein. We would like to say thank you to all those who believed in us, helped us along the way, and ultimately brought this project to life. This episode is dedicated to Marina Flores for hiring me and introducing me to the incredible world of homeless services. Thank you for always making space and modeling hospitality for those who do this work. Marion Sanders, for bringing me back to LA in 2020. To Kelvin Driscoll, for always encouraging me and supporting my team while I was away. And to Millie Lopez, Angel Edwards, Deandra Davis, Deetra Briggs, Jasmine James, Regina Winley, Johanna Brown, and James Licavoli, for your tireless leadership of the A-Team. You are unstoppable. Thanks for listening, folks. Let's keep talking.